and welcome to our online info session for the Diploma in Health Information Management program at Ashton College. My name is Lindsay and I'm from the marketing department here at Ashton. Today I'm joined by Joëlle, one of our faculty members in the DHIM department. Hi Joëlle, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We also have Demi in the back end. She'll just be monitoring the Zoom chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Like I said, there's lots of ways to engage with us. The chat box, you can do that. There's a Q&A box as well, or raise the hand function. If you're tuning in on Facebook Live, please leave us a comment and we'll answer your questions live during the session. If you're watching this video on YouTube afterwards, you can leave a comment or give us a call at 604-899-0803. We also have a toll-free number. That's 1-866-759-6006. Awesome. So first, can you start off by just sharing, actually, instead of talking about yourself first, I just want to first get out of the way. Tell us a little bit about what health information management is.
Well, as you all know, in health information management or when we talk about healthcare, there's going to be a lot of data. So we have a lot of chart notes, we have a lot of coding, we might have a lot of information that gets stored. People's personal health information. So what happens with that information? That is what we're basically dealing with, is how do we keep that information secure? How do we transfer that information between people? What happens with that information? How do you request that information? So there's a lot of learning that has to be done as to how to do that, but also at the back end is how the actual coding, the actual information itself, how does that get handled? And so that is essentially what the program is all about.
Awesome. So can you talk a little bit about yourself, maybe your background or how you got into doing health information management?
Sure. I started with a Bachelor of Science at UBC, and then I did 4 years of naturopathic medical school. And then I spent the last 10 years in Hong Kong practicing naturopathic medicine in a multidisciplinary clinic. And then I've recently returned to Canada. And since doing that, I was looking to expand my day-to-day work life. And I was really interested in teaching. A lot of my colleagues were telling me that something that has really enriched their lives. And so Ashton College had the perfect program. And so I teach a component of the program, which is anatomy, physiology, as well as medical terminology. So those are the two classes that I've so far taught. And yeah, that's how I've been involved in the program.
So you do the courses that are very foundational, that for someone like me who I've always wanted to get into the medical or health field in some way, but those are the courses, the biology and physiology, that's always like, oh, a little overwhelming for me. So it's great that they're at the beginning. Just since I mentioned that, do you have any advice maybe, or do people need to be super comfortable with all of the science knowledge before they get into the program, or do you think they can learn enough during it or be comfortable enough with it during the program?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, well, there's a few prerequisites to the program. So as long as you have the prerequisites, all of the students I've been teaching so far have had vastly different backgrounds. And so some of them had degrees in microbiology or lab technicians, and some people were coming from a more administrative aspect in, really large businesses where they were just handling the information with no medical knowledge. And so that's the nice thing, is that the classes, at least that I'm teaching, are quite at the beginning of the class. And so since we're going to be dealing with, you need to know the language of the medical aspects that you're going to be handling. So that's the information itself that you're going to be carrying and or coding and or disseminating whatever it is you do. But you need to know what it is you're handling. So that's the part that I'm talking about. And we start off so basic, and then it builds on every single class. And by the end of it, some of the students, they're like, oh, I can be a doctor now. Like this is, and they were speaking as if they were my colleagues, and it was very, very impressive. So it's a very quick crash course, but you get to know everything you need to know. I was really impressed. So it's very, people with no medical background can definitely get a very good understanding of what it is that you might see in a chart note or what it is that you might see in a research article. So yeah, from that aspect, the coding aspect, I know that they're going to be very big experts on that just because that's the bulk of the hours in the program. But the first hours are the ones that I do. And then yeah, I would say no need for a medical background.
That's amazing to hear. I'm sure people would appreciate that they don't have to have that science background to get into something like this, because I know this industry, this field is pretty new, it's pretty up and coming, it's expanding all the time. So it's definitely good that anyone from different backgrounds can get into it. Let's see. Oh, I kind of already asked you about your career experience. So I can go to the next one, unless you have more you want to share about how, well, I would love to actually hear a little bit more about your experience in Hong Kong and how doing naturopathic medicine in Hong Kong differs from working in Canada, maybe.
Sure. Well, what struck me the most working in Hong Kong is just how similar everybody is. Everyone has at the end of it, our bodies are all the same across the world. So, the inside of the body is the same anatomy, the same physiology, all the same lab work, or all the same things can be out of range or in range. And it's all basically the same things that we're looking for. So it was surprising to me that, the same stress, digestion, that kind of thing are typically the same basic complaints that most people have. So you could be anywhere. That was really my takeaway, is that it could have been anywhere in the world, and mostly it would be the same kind of aspects and the same approach to health, which is, a person trying to resolve the root cause first and then addressing all their symptoms instead of just the one, and then trying to go from there.
Beautiful. I love that answer. So can you talk about how this program is beneficial for students? And what do you think students will enjoy or appreciate the most about this program?
Yeah, I actually asked my students that on the first day because I thought I wanted to get an idea of what they're coming in for, what aspect of the program, because sometimes it's a means to an end, where, some people, they have to do the anatomy physiology to get to the coding, or maybe they're just doing the statistics in order to get with the information itself. So I wasn't sure. And a lot of them were coming from completely different aspects. And most of the students were really excited about the coding and actually really dreading the anatomy, physiology, or the medical terminology. So some of the students had background with that and it was boring. But so the feedback that I got at the end was that it was actually not that bad. And by doing it in maybe a more experiential way, or a way that we were actually talking to each other instead of doing just quizzes, because it can be very dry. However, if we do it in a way that it's almost like a conversation and you have to do it, by doing it, you learn it. And so that's really what a lot of the students were saying, is that they might not have been looking forward to that specific aspect, although some of them really were, like that was what they were really looking forward to. It was not that bad. So yeah, I guess everyone is different. Everyone's looking for a different thing. However, most people excelled in the classes that I've been teaching, at least. So it didn't matter what they were looking forward to or not. Everyone could do it.
And it sounds like participation and getting engaged in discussions was a really big thing that people found to be beneficial for them. Sounds like. Awesome. So the next one, can you talk a little bit about what your teaching style is like?
Sure. Well, I guess that ties into the last question a little bit. I would say it's very much about having the students do the actual work. Instead of actually just reading a PowerPoint and then just listening and doing quizzes, that kind of thing, you won't remember that. So you might know it that day, and if you do the quiz right after, you'd have you pass the quiz, but you're not going to come away from the program really knowing it. So the way I structured it was actually learning how to read a chart note and then how to make a chart note. And then we would do role play where one person would be a patient and they would talk about all their symptoms. we spent hours doing that to the point where it was so natural for the students to actually understand what is the subjective findings, what are the objective findings, what are the labs that we would run. So it's kind of the order in which it would be done in a hospital or in a doctor's visit, and then using the medical terminology. Little by little, we started using, instead of saying, I have a, I don't know, fainting or dizziness, we would talk about, this person has orthostatic hypotension and they have erythema. And at the end, everyone knew exactly what we're talking about, and they were actually finding it hard to translate it back to common language, just because that's how we spoke the whole time. And so that's really my style, I guess, is to have people just jump in completely. And at the beginning, it's, you have to use your brain a lot more. You have to Google the words. It's like, what is it that we want to say? But the more you do that, it just became an actual second language for the students. So that, I believe, is when you can speak in that manner without thinking or translating anymore, I think that becomes something that you can carry with you, and then you don't have to forget it in the same way.
So once the jargon becomes second nature to you and it's not jargon for you anymore, that's when you've actually learned what you're meant to learn in those courses. Awesome. What are some of your expectations of students who enroll in the program, and how much study time, or not work during not the class time, but outside of that, how much time each week do you think they need to do that to be successful?
So we were using a pretty good textbook, and the textbook we had, it's an online textbook. You can get a paper one as well, but the online one's pretty good because you can do the quizzes and then erase it and then try it again. So reading the textbook, I would say an hour of at-home time was enough in order to read the textbook, do the assignments. And over the course, I have at least 3 quizzes throughout, but that wasn't more than an hour each, and then a final exam, which was 3 hours. And there was also an assignment that took maybe a few hours to do, but I give it as soon as I can at the beginning of the course so that students can do it, 15 minutes every week, that kind of thing. So by the end of it, they should be able to have it done. So I would say an hour of at-home time. And then during the class is when we're just really using our brains and working as hard as we can, maximizing the time in the classroom. So the other part of that question was, what are my expectations, is purely participation. It wasn't ever about getting the right answer. And in reality, a lot of times that there was a wrong answer, it was a great learning opportunity for everyone to say, oh no, like that's, we wouldn't actually do that, or we would want to be careful about giving that diagnosis because it means this. And so there is a lot of great learning that can be had from maybe not the correct answer. So just participating in a really free manner where there was no judgment. All the students were so respectful, and as long as everyone participates, everyone learns from everyone else. So it actually, when it was their turn to speak, we could actually get a lot of learning from that. So yeah, that's it. That's the expectation. It's pretty straightforward.
That's awesome. I definitely remember being in university classes and wanting to say something which I knew, if I had a question, or I just wanted to say, I think it's this, and then you just are scared and you hold back, and then someone else does it and you're like, oh, I wasn't the only person thinking that. Okay, that's really cool that I was not alone on, even though it's not necessarily right as you're saying, but I'm not alone on thinking this is what the solution was. And then, yeah, great learning opportunity to figure out how to get to the correct solution. Beautiful. So this is a little difficult of a question, and if you know, awesome. If not, that's okay. But do you know what are some career options, or maybe some typical next steps for students after they graduate from the Diploma in Health Information Management?
So again, the program might have a better understanding for that, but from what I know so far, so there's some people in the back end of the hospital, like the hospital administration or the IT department, who are actually coding the information that's going through the hospital, or the Ministry of Health, right? So the BC government or the Canadian government, working with social medicine in terms of the insurance aspects, or actually disseminating information. So research, a lot of universities might have that as well. And even a medical office, right? So some of the larger interdisciplinary offices need to share charts or send that kind of thing to government agencies. So it would be anybody who's handling the information, who's not directly involved with the patient. You know, if they're going to be doing pamphlets for talking about, you know, conditions or diseases or that kind of thing for the general public. So there's so many different kinds of roles that I know exist. It's just which specific one, I don't know. But there's a vast variety that could be applicable to the program.
And that's one great thing about the practicum opportunity as well, that can put you into one of the potential paths, and you may go, oh, I don't like this. Let's try one of the other, because I believe there's 7 competencies that they have. So it's definitely like the research part sounds super fascinating, where you could, you know, help the community or help the public with all the findings that you have. Like that's a really cool way to do that, but neither you or I probably have any idea what that really is. So they definitely have to do research on that. And the different instructors will know different paths in this industry, which is really cool as well. And you can network with all of them when you're in the program. So I was just given a question. It's kind of about professional pathways and opportunities and leveling up in that. And again, I feel like that's probably not a question you can answer, or I can bring it up later. Maybe we can look at that together. I can look at the career opportunities on our webpage. But yeah, I'll look at that later. Just so you know, there is a question about career options again. Let's see, we talked a little bit about this, but what is some advice you would give to someone who is maybe brand new to the industry, whether that's the medical industry or data or tech, because that's kind of what is the mixture of health information management. What kind of advice do you give to that person, or someone that's just changing careers from something radically different?
Well, I guess there's hope. You know, you can always start fresh. Most of my students are, you know, mature students who are completely changing industries, but weren't entirely satisfied with what they were doing, or just have a really big interest in this being much more aligned with what they want to do. And I would say the program itself gives you the steps. Once you finish the staircase, you're at an area where you have all the tools you need in order to go out into the world and be competent. So that to me was the most important thing, is that my students feel like they know enough of where to look. So my main message was don't worry about memorizing all of this. It's, you know, we're going to try and get you to know as much as we can to have it be second nature, that kind of thing, but where to look. As long as you know where to find the information and what to do, you should be absolutely set. And so that's my advice, is not to worry that you need to know it all right away. By the end of the program, you should have the competencies at least to know exactly where to find the information. And, you know, the nice thing, at least in the medical aspect, mistakes are made, right? So this is completely normal. And mistakes happen, and that's a big part of the ethics component of this class, is as long as you know how to talk about when you make a mistake, who to talk about that, what are the steps to do with a mistake, because they happen. And so it's not that we're trying to avoid them. Obviously we don't want them to happen as much, but it's to know what do we do when it happens, because it does happen. And so it's completely non-judgmental, really, in medicine, is that there's a lot of, you know, no pressure to be perfect. It's doing the best you can and knowing what to do when you know, when there's an error. That's it.
I think that advice can really ease people's, you know, nerves or imposter syndrome potentially as well, because they think, like you said, some people think you have to know everything just off the top of your head, and it's like no one really works that way. Like as long as we know where to go or who to discuss it with. You're right. That's great. I love that. What would you say is your favorite or the most interesting part about working in the healthcare industry or medical field?
It's always interesting. So I guess that's the main thing, is that it's never boring. Sometimes it's overwhelming. Sometimes there's a lot going on. Sometimes, you have to research because you might not have any clue what is sitting in front of you, but it's very interesting. So if you're looking for something that is a career at least, that is going to be using your brain and your, different parts of your brain, your problem solving brain, your people skills brain, your research brain, or your cognitive, logical, all those kind of things, you have to use kind of it all in order to, achieve success in that area. But the nice thing is that everyone has those aspects, and that we can practice little bits of it and at least understand where your weaknesses are and where your strengths are, and then you can play to those. So that's what I like the most about it, is that it's a different day every day. You never know what you're going to see.
And I'm sure you can say the same thing about health information management and whichever way you decide to go. I just have the webpage open. I just want to read what some of the things we have on there are, if that's okay.
Sure.
So we have coding, like you mentioned, that's a great career path to go through. Research and statistics, risk management, that's something that's really cool as well. You could work at a community health clinic. You could work for a primary care agency and nursing homes. You could work in service. You can work in admitting, patient registration. There's information systems, utilization management, decision support. That sounds like a big one right there. Wow, so there's a lot of different ways you can go, which is both exciting and can be a little overwhelming as well. But since you're talking about most people are mature students, we all have time. Even if we are a mature student, we all have time to choose what path we want. We can make mistakes and try one thing, not like it, and then switch to something else. That's something that's beautiful about careers nowadays, I want to say. We can switch if we want. That's okay. So let's see. You talked a little bit about this, but maybe you want to expand a little bit. What qualities or characteristics make someone best suited for this career path?
I would say something like having integrity. So knowing that, if I would want somebody to treat my medical information or my information with respect, with confidentiality, and with an ethical aspect. So I would say that to me is the most important thing that I see, is that as long as my students can know that this information there's a sacredness to it, right? This is very, very important information, and we have to, it's not intuitive, right? That's the thing. We have to learn to kind of override talking about an interesting case or saying, oh, this is what I heard about today. And we have to remember that's actually someone's really private information. So integrity, I would say, is the most important thing. And then a little bit of responsibility. As long as you have that, I think everyone would feel so comfortable knowing that that information is in your hands. So as long as my students know the importance of that, that's very important to me, that they know that by the end of the course. And because we kind of forget those little codes on the screen or that information is actually tied to a real person. And yeah, I'd say that's it.
That's great. I think that's great. I think people definitely will know if they have that integrity or not as well. Like that's something that you definitely know. It's not so non-tangible that it's not so intangible that you're like, oh, maybe I have this, maybe I don't, but that's something that I think you know for sure. So I'm getting near my last few questions. So if anyone has any questions they would like to ask Joëlle, please throw them in the Zoom chat and Demi will watch for those. So Joëlle, how has the industry changed during your years of experience?
When I graduated, all the doctors were writing with paper notes. There was not really anything electronic. And now, when is it, like 15 years later, everything is electronic. And so electronic health management is actually very important, which necessitates essentially this field itself. So to me, that was the biggest change in the industry, is there's different softwares we have to use. There's different rules we have to use, for just transferring things by email or text. It's not intuitive. You'd want to do something because it makes the most sense, but sometimes there's HIPAA regulations or that kind of thing that we have to take into account. And so the electronic aspect has really, radically changed the industry.
And that's probably what's brought up the need for health information management professionals.
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, I have a question here. It's how important is continuing education in this industry, and what resources are available for professionals to continue to learn and improve?
So I'm belonging to a different college, but this is a regulated profession. So health information management has its own accreditation and its own college that you would be belonging to. And so I would assume it's the same as what I belong to, is that every year you have a certain amount of continuing education credits, or sometimes it's a 2-year rolling year, that kind of thing. So every year you'd have to complete, say 20 to 40 hours of that continuing education. And they'll give you different categories potentially, or they'll give you, certain companies or websites or organizations that you can do that continuing education through. And typically they send a newsletter and they say, these are the new classes that are available, or there's a website, these are the courses that you can do. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're mandatory, sometimes they're given to you. There should be an AGM that you would do every year. Again, I'm assuming that it's going to be quite similar to my own accredited college, but that's typically how you get into the continuing education component.
Perfect. Yeah, the college that has accredited our program is the one I mentioned earlier, and that's the Canadian College of Health Information Management. Mm-hmm. And yeah, to keep with keeping the CHIM, which is the Certified in Health Information Management, a little bit of a mouthful. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things, and it's everything that you said. It's continuing education, it's going to the meetings, getting the newsletter, and that's great. So just because everything changes all the time, I'm sure in your field there's new things coming up all the time. So it's great that there is different colleges that are keeping everyone accountable for what they need to know. It's awesome. So let's see. Looks like that's all the questions. So I'm going to end it off with, do you have any final words of advice or any thoughts you would like to share with us, Joëlle?
Oh, I didn't prepare for that
one. Whatever you want to share.
I would say just if it really draws you, it would be something that would be really valuable. If it's something that you feel that is calling your name, I would say go for it, because we really need people with integrity, responsibility to be in that industry, to do that back end of the coding, the statistics, and the caretaking really of the patient files and the patient health information.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's a great way to end it. Thank you for joining us today, Joëlle. It was great to have you here, and I'm sure everyone looks forward to having you in their first few courses. And if anyone has any more questions, please do not hesitate to give us a call. Those numbers again are 604-899-0803 or toll free at 1-866-759-6006, or please visit our website, ashtoncollege.ca.